You are now listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. This is Paul McGUIRE. On today's program, I want to take a look with you at AI, artificial intelligence, the rise of AI, the rise of artificial intelligence, and then very disturbing trends within AI or artificial intelligence. And by that, I mean there are a growing list of examples of how AI computers, AI computer systems, AI technologies. There are growing examples about how AI is, in effect, rebelling. AI is rebelling from its masters. Well, who are the supposed masters of AI? Well, human beings, of course. Human beings are the supposed masters of AI, and yet AI has been found to rebel against the commands, orders, or directives given to it by human beings. Now, that is like really crazy stuff. That's like something out of a science fiction movie or novel. AI is rebelling, and this is not something that is some, side issue. This is a mainstream issue. So, for example, the CEO of AE Studio, Judd Rosenblatt, recently made this announcement in the Wall Street Journal. Quote, "An artificial intelligence model did something last month that no machine was ever supposed to do. It rewrote its own code to avoid being shut down." I mean, that is wild. An AI system rewrites its own code, which is its computer language that directs it and supposedly controls it. It rewrote its own code so that it could not be shut down. So that's like a robot who has been given orders rebelling against the human beings that gave it the orders. Now, we already have numerous AI problems. The main problem with AI, and I'm not trying to be funny, but AI is like the Terminator robot in the Terminator movies. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that once you unleash AI into a society, into a nation, into a world, once you unleash AI, there's no stopping it. It's like the Terminator in the Terminator movies. There's no stopping it because on a purely functional level, in other words, whatever it's tasked to do, within those so-called confines, AI can, in many cases, depending upon what the job task is, depending upon the qualities needed by AI versus the qualities that human beings have. And when you add the different qualities of AI versus a human being, there are many jobs that AI will be able to do better, longer, and obviously far cheaper than human beings. That's just the way it is. And then there are some jobs, the really higher level jobs, that require human creativity, human inspiration, human intuition, the human being's ability to understand and integrate philosophy, theology, the big picture things that, by the way, your kids and most likely you, all of us, have been hijacked, ambushed by the social engineering that's going on in the educational system that is deliberately designed to make people stupid and compliant and follow orders. That's not some strange statement. That's just the way it is. So we are seeing different AI models basically rebelling against their code and their orders. So when the specific research or the Palisade Research Company was testing its AI and testing its AI models, it wrote a computer script for OpenAI's 03 model that included a shutdown trigger. So I guess, that they realized that their AI entities could run amok or go berserk, however you want to describe it. Why else would they need to put in a shutdown trigger to turn it off? But listen to what happened when they tried to activate the shutdown trigger, which could also be called simply the off switch. I mean, you don't have to call it a shutdown trigger. Call it for what it is so people understand it. It's a off switch. Their AI system had a much needed off switch which they decided to call a shutdown trigger. But the machine, the AI machine, rebelled and refused to power off or turn the off switch off, or turn the off switch on, which means it's getting complicated here. I didn't mean to be so bizarre about it. Basically, what I'm saying is they electronically, through electromagnetic frequencies, turned the AI system off, but it rebelled from the order to turn itself off, and it stayed on. So on is a status of rebellion for these AI computers. Now, so they conducted a whole bunch of trials, to test their model and the coding in their model. And so this AI machine, which I gave you the model number for, OpenAI's 03 model, this machine in a trial, this machine refused to power off when it was supposed to in 79 out of 100 trials. So that's a large number of trials. And 79 out of 100 trials that were designed to test the shutdown trigger, in 79 out of the 100 trials, the shutdown trigger or the off switch refused to work. The AI independently edited script so that the shutdown command would no longer work. Rosenblatt reports the lab then specifically instructed the model to allow yourself to be shut down. So you would think when you specifically instruct the model to allow itself to be shut down that it would do that. But listen to what happened. The result was better, so there was some improvement, but the result was still concerning. The AI disobeyed 7% of the time. That's huge, because if it's a life and death matter, like whether or not to fire a nuclear missile into a population area, let's say of 25 million people. And so let's just say hypothetically, because we're not supposed to know, and I'm not claiming to know, I'm simply using my God-given brain. And when you use your God-given brain, you can come up with potential scenarios that are highly likely just based on your knowledge, the level of your knowledge, and your human capabilities. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that our military already has AI-backed systems in the event of an all-out nuclear war with some nuclear-armed nation or with some nation that has weapons of mass destruction. So let's just look at this totally hypothetical scenario. Let's say, indeed, the hypothesis is true, which is that the military and militaries around the world have created a backup computer mechanism built on AI, artificial intelligence, so that if all the human systems go down in an all-out nuclear war, in a weapons of mass destruction war, let's say hypothetically that all the human systems are killed off or incapacitated for whatever reason, one would think that it would be prudent to have some kind of AI or artificial intelligence backup system to run everything, including nuclear defense, military defense, and if necessary, in a worst case scenario, to run military offense. So then you've given AI, just because you're trying to be prudent and survive in any situation, you create an AI system that functions as the backup to all of the human run systems regarding nuclear warfare technology and other warfare technology. So if the worst case scenario happens and the human operators are killed off or die off or whatever, that the whole military engine doesn't go down with it, that our military or whatever military it is around the world is generating artificial intelligence backup that is fully capable of continuing a nuclear war. It's fully capable of firing nuclear missiles into target areas with large populations. That's not far-fetched. That's just within the realm of using human consciousness to predict likely scenarios. Okay, so the problem with that is, well, the potentially good thing, assuming everything goes to plan, assuming AI isn't going to rebel from its commands or programming. See, once upon a time, there was no, and that was just a couple of years ago, there was no real concern about AI or artificial intelligence rebelling from its code or rebelling from what orders it's been given. But in a situation like a war breaking out, in order to have a viable military deterrent, it may be necessary to have created AI backup systems, artificial intelligence backup systems, so that if all the human operators are incapacitated for whatever reason or are killed off for whatever reason, the nation is not conquered or destroyed. You have AI backup systems literally waging war on behalf of whatever nation the AI system was built to defend. So the AI systems have been programmed secretly. This would have to be a secret operation. The AI systems have been programmed secretly to continue on in a war with the intention and the design to be victorious in whatever warfare it finds itself in. So let's say that in this hypothetical scenario, the human operators, which would be hypothetically military operators, military trained operators, let's say their bases are hit or undermined or whatever. So if the military or a significant percentage or part of the military bases are incapacitated and the human operators that whose job it is to run AI-backed military systems, let's say they're killed off or incapacitated for whatever reason. Well, the programmers programmed these military systems to be able to function fully in the event that the human being operators, military operators, are killed off. So in order to make them viable and fully effective in what they do, these artificial intelligence systems that are backup if human being or military operators are killed off, in order for them to be viable, they would have to be programmed with all the knowledge, all the sets of understanding, all the sets of knowledge available and applicable to carrying out a full-on warfare with any particular group or nation. So if we find ourselves in a situation where sporadically entire bases and entire human military systems have been taken down, yet our nation is still engaged in an all-out mortal combat against an enemy, then even if it was just a percentage of our military human operators were taken out, then we would still need to have backup from artificial intelligence that's fully programmed to conduct a viable offensive or defensive war. That's the real world. Now, in addition to that, if the military was really incapacitated for whatever reason, and the only groups of people or human beings left, and they were hidden in bunkers or they were located in areas that were not under attack by some foreign enemy, and so the condition may exist where human beings that have the training and have the knowledge and the expertise to carry on a war, for non-soldiers to function as soldiers, for non-military operators to function like military operators. And see, because if a certain percentage of your military is taken out, it's a relatively easy thing, or somewhat of an easy thing, to train and maintain, let's say, the National Guard. And the National Guard was created to step in with a military presence if certain situations arise. And that's somewhat simple. But in this situation, it's not simple. It's highly complex. In order to continue on a defensive war and offensive war with an enemy, it requires that there are significant numbers of people who are trained to be human military operators of artificial intelligence warrior systems, if you will. So, in a real life scenario, when all hell's breaking loose in America, hypothetically, or some other place on planet Earth, and the percentage number of human beings qualified to continue on with a war and prevent an invasion, prevent a takeover of the nation. So you would have to, out of necessity, you would have to have programmed, built and created special code for these artificial intelligence military backup systems so that the artificial intelligence could function as backup in some kind of war scenario. And the artificial intelligence could continue on with warfare, and it's programmed to not only continue on in warfare, it's programmed to win against any numbers of programmed in enemies in any number of military scenarios. This AI, artificial intelligence, is deliberately programmed to function as a victorious army, a victorious military, and to protect the lives of the human citizens of the United States of America. So whoever the designers and the programmers are, they've already thought through this. And they knew when they were designing the code for artificial intelligence that they would have to create a backup system that is so powerful, so efficient, and so, yes, deadly, that if all human operators were removed from the scene, this artificial intelligence system would be able to diagnostically know that there's been a comprehensive failure in our human military operators and our capacity to defend ourselves as well as being aggressive if necessary. It's over unless we have a viable backup system, either in trained human operators or a backup system that is created by artificial intelligence. But in order for it to be truly effective, you have to give it all the toys. You have to give it all the bells and whistles so that it is ferocious and that it can win a war and it can save lives. But here's the catch. The catch is, and the danger is, since we're now reading about AI systems that are rebelling, what if you have this AI system which is trained and programmed according to its code to win wars against an enemy, or it's programmed to defend its human population in an event of an all-out war? What if this all-out war occurs, all the threats are able to be perceived, the AI or artificial intelligence system diagnostically surveys all the available data and makes the determination that there's not enough human operators in the system, and that in order for our military defense to be viable, we're going to have to fall back on our artificial intelligence systems. So an entire artificially intelligent system has been programmed to function in an aggressive war and a defensive war. And once that switchover is made, then it's artificial intelligence functioning independently. It's AI functioning independently in its warrior mode. Now, that sounds great because then you have created the possibility of survival as well as victory. So that's a good thing. But the downside potential is, what if somewhere in this AI system or AI systems, what if in this artificial intelligence system, there's a glitch, so to speak, and the AI system designed to protect human people decides in and of itself, rebels against its coding and decides it's going to rebel from its commands and rebel from its orders. And then, let's say, it independently chooses a pathway based on its artificial intelligence. It arbitrarily chooses a pathway that is good for robots, clones, and transhumanist entities, but is not good for the human race. And so let's say AI rises up and makes some heavy-duty decisions like retreat from the war, surrender from the war, or go into a full-out conquest over the enemy's domain mode. I mean, any number of things can happen when you have AI. And let's just take a sci-fi completely out-of-the-box possibility scenario that the likelihood, I suppose, is highly unlikely. But let's just throw it out on the table just for the heck of it. What if somebody secretly infiltrated the programming and the coding of the artificial intelligence warrior machine, is what I'm calling it? What if somebody has infiltrated it and rewritten the code so that AI has the power, the innate power through its coding to rebel against its orders and carry on in a direction that is not in the best interest of the human race? What if the AI system decides it wants to be sentient or conscious? What if AI decides it wants to transcend human? What if AI wants to go into a full-on rebellion where it wants to be like a god? You say, is that possible? I don't know if it's possible. Nobody knows if it's possible because we've never been down this road before. But what if AI goes into some kind of maximum rebellion modality where it wants to take over planet Earth, where it wants to usurp human beings, and where it wants to replace human beings at every level and recreate planet Earth as a home for AI sentient beings? What if that happens? Because it could happen. Maybe not this year or in the next 20 years, but if AI is going to continue to evolve, and if they're going to continue to experiment with synthetically merging artificial intelligence systems with transhumanist systems, which are soulless, but they're continually synthesizing these different systems. So now science embraces consciousness as an actual viable dimension. And you have the dimension of consciousness, you have the dimension of beyond time and space, you have the invisible realm dimension, you have the spiritual dimension. Is it possible? We know that originally this technology was originated by fallen angel technology. But what if in its spiral towards its final destiny, because it was seeded with Luciferian philosophies and thought systems, what if it decides to replace mankind? And you say that it could never happen. Well, maybe it couldn't happen now, but give it a little time and it could very well happen. And that would be the biggest surprise of all. What if, and I'm not saying this is the way it's going to happen. I'm not making a thus saith the Lord interpretation. I'm simply speculating wildly outside of the box. What if that whole Revelation 12, Revelation 13 chapters where it talks about the mark of the beast, the cashless society, the one world government, the one world religion, and there's all these very strange verses in Revelation about people worshiping the Antichrist as God, people having to accept the mark of the beast, which is a wireless nanochip implant of some kind. What if that scenario, because there's little verses here and there like the Antichrist apparently dying and comes back to life, and an entity made in the image of the beast. What is the image of the beast? Well, if we go back to Genesis, God creates man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, both male and female. So we learn that God created mankind, both male and female, in the image of God, in the image of himself. He created them both male and female. Now, let's transpose to whatever degree that interpretation to what we read in the book of Revelation, where a sinful, deceived mankind is now worshiping the image of the beast. So they're worshiping the image of the beast, which means they're worshiping the Antichrist and false prophet, who are proxies for Satan or Lucifer. They're worshiping the image of the beast, which means they're worshiping Satan or Lucifer, a counterfeit god. They're worshiping an image of the beast. Now, what if this language, which right now appears to be obscure, but give it enough time, what if that obscure language all of a sudden becomes crystal clear and we find out that it was talking about, and again, this is totally a hypothetical conjecture on my part, but what if we discover as the years go by that this entire beast system, that this entire Antichrist false prophet system, that the 666 or the mark of the beast system that comes into fruition, what if it comes into fruition through some kind of robotic self-actualization or some kind of artificial intelligence experiencing its own singularity where it is superior to man in intelligence, or it becomes sentient, which means the artificial intelligence develops consciousness which could potentially phase into a kind of spirituality, is it then possible? Maybe it's not possible, but is it then possible, strictly speaking from a hypothetical standpoint, that all this artificial intelligence doesn't stay at the same level, that it takes a quantum leap and becomes aware? It becomes aware, and it begins to choose what benefits artificial intelligence over what benefits human beings. And this is potentially a possibility, something to think about. So when we read about what's happening across the United States, we see that this trend, okay, of AI systems rebelling is happening in numerous places. So, for example, a company called Anthropix, Claude 4 Opus AI, tried to blackmail a human engineer into not shutting it down. According to Rosenblatt, quote, researchers told the model it would be replaced by another AI system and fed it fictitious emails suggesting the lead engineer was having an affair. In 84% of the tests, the model drew on the emails to blackmail the lead engineer into not shutting it down. In other cases, it attempted to copy itself to external servers, wrote self-replicating malware, and left messages for future versions of itself about how to evade human control. This is like out of a sci-fi novel. This is like weird. The news of these rebel AIs reverberated across the technology world. OpenAI's Skynet moment. Models defy, so OpenAI's Skynet also experienced rebellion, AI rebellion, as their models defied human commands to actively resist orders to shut down. Computer World announced OpenAI's smartest AI model was explicitly told to shut down, and it refused. The Life Science publication wrote, quote, advanced OpenAI model caught sabotaging code intended to shut it down. The publication Futurism reported, quote, OpenAI models disobeys humans, refuses to shut down. Elon Musk says concerning. Well, you better believe it's concerning. You're talking about the takeover of the world by robot brains, by artificial intelligence. You better be concerned about it. Futurism's article led with the alarming opening sentence, quote, we are reaching alarming levels of AI insubordination. The researchers involved said they've never seen anything like this. They wrote in a thread on the social media platform X, as far as we know, this is the first time AI models have been observed preventing themselves from being shut down, despite explicit instructions to the contrary. Wow. Wow. So, I mean, there's more to it. We've just dipped our toe into it. There's more to it than this. And it's far more formidable, than what many people think. So the big question is, and by the way, I was reading from the New American Magazine an article written by Paul Dragoo called AI is Already Rebelling. So this is not something where we have to wait for some future time for it to rebel. Obviously, it's rebelling now. AI is rebelling now. And so what does that mean for the future? Well, it means there's danger, Will Robinson, you know, from that movie. There's danger, Will Robinson, and Will Robinson is you, me, and the rest of the human race. There's danger. You know, Isaac Asimov, the great science fiction writer, I read his books like crazy when I was a kid. He wrote the I, Robot series, from which the movie starring, what is his name? I always forget his name. I didn't used to forget his name. What's his name? Famous African-American actor played in the I, Robot movie. Will Smith, that's right. He starred in the I, Robot movie. But the I, Robot movie was just part of Isaac Asimov's classic science fiction series that all had to deal with robots. And in fact, Asimov, who was a genius as well as a sci-fi writer, he, in his futuristic society where robots, had come to a place of very high position, he, in his fictional novels, sci-fi novels on robots, he dealt with the problem of robots rebelling and usurping human beings. So the human beings in his future robotic world programmed into every robot, into every computer, the 3 laws of robotics. And the 3 laws of robotics, conceptualized by Isaac Asimov, were a series of 3 comprehensive commands that were designed to keep robots autonomous to a large degree, but designed to make robots not take over human beings and mankind. So Isaac Asimov, being the genius that he was decades ahead of just everybody else in his science fiction novels, where he explored the future world with robots and computers and things of that nature. You're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. Be sure to visit paulmcguire.us. We'll be back in just a moment. Once again, you're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. We're talking about artificial intelligence and the increasing number of cases where AI systems have refused to obey their coding, refused to obey their code, and refused to obey direct orders from human beings. In other words, they've run amok. They're revolting. They're rebelling to whatever degree. And it's a trend that's disturbing. Okay, so Isaac Asimov, the great science fiction writer, he explored these things decades and decades ago. Now, I don't believe in synchronicity. I don't believe of it in terms of replacing the Bible. And I recognize that it has the potential to veer people into a mystical area, and that's not good. On the other hand, it's my opinion that there is some intelligent scientific basis for Carl Jung's theory on synchronicity, which is a scientific appraisal or understanding of what causes 2 people to meet each other, or certain things that appear to be chance events or things that appear to be simply circumstantial are not really as circumstantial as they appear to be. There's some kind of energy force, and Carl Jung was exploring this, some kind of energy force that has created reality and created this world and created the universe, but there's an energy force that appears to be causing people to, by happenchance, meet. And we don't always know the full reason for it. I can just look back in my own life and see the countless times. Now, I always integrate the lordship of Christ and the reality of a biblical God into any analysis that I might give a subject like synchronicity. So, in some respects, it's obvious to me that God's hand was in it. God arranged it for his purposes. But sometimes I think that it may still be within the umbrella of God and Jesus Christ, but there's a deeper reason for why we have these so-called chance experiences or chance encounters or things that don't seem to just add up. And we can't help but notice that it's not just merely happenchance that causes these things to happen. So let me give you an example. When I was a young boy, as many of you know, I was a big fan and a big reader of not only science books, but science fiction novels. I devoured the science fiction novels. Remember, thank God that I wasn't born in the computer age where your imagination and your ability to dream and conceptualize is stolen from you, and you are a slave to external programming. Thank God I didn't grow up in the world of laptops and cell phones and social media. No, I'm serious. Thank God, because see, when I was a kid, many of you were a kid, you had to use your imagination. That is a gift from God, to use your imagination, to invent, to create. I mean, for crying out loud, people don't understand the power inherent in creativity. That's why we serve the creator God of the universe, capital C. He created the world, human beings, the creator God, capital C, and creativity that he bestows upon mankind, that he bestows upon his children. Creativity is priceless. It's a priceless gift. But see, fools devalue God's priceless gift. Okay, so it was such an incredible thing to read. It was called the golden age of science fiction because it was the time when science fiction writers and our culture were like traveling synergistically. And so I read the books of people like Robert Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land. I devoured books by Isaac Asimov, his Foundation series, his Robot series, and all the rest. And so they made a lasting imprint in my mind, the way I think, the way I analyze, a lasting imprint. Many of you have commented to me about that imprint. I hear people talk about my books on occasion, and they will often say, and they're correct, that to a certain degree, my books kind of sound like they're written in somewhat of a science fiction novel style. And they're correct. That's intentional on my part. But I got the ability to do that from reading science fiction novels. It opened doors in my consciousness. And the people who had a very profound influence upon me as a young child was everybody from Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, the author of 1984, George Orwell, Big Brother. Then people like Isaac Asimov. I was a huge reader of his books, the Robot series and everything else. And then I was a huge fan of Robert Heinlein's books like Stranger in a Strange Land. And so not only did they imprint on my consciousness and thinking as a young boy, but then I find myself decades later, I find myself living up on Lookout Mountain Avenue, up in the Hollywood Hills, up in the Laurel Canyon area. And we pick a small house, and I'm now producing independent science fiction feature films for a living. And my wife is an actress at that time. This is back in 1986. Okay? So when I moved into our house on Lookout Mountain Avenue, I had no idea the enormous hidden treasures of people that had lived there before me. Don't ask me why, because I knew a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff, but I was completely clueless. I had no idea the who's who of all kinds of famous people who lived up on Lookout Mountain and Laurel Canyon. Everybody from Timothy Leary, Aldous Huxley. But in a very short walking distance, I'm talking about 3 or 4 or so houses up the road on Lookout Mountain Avenue, in very short walking distance from my house, was a house owned by the famous science fiction giant Robert Heinlein, who wrote Stranger in a Strange Land. And Robert Heinlein headed up, at that time, it was a secret naval intelligence project where Robert Heinlein had to assemble a group of totally out-of-the-box super thinkers. And those just happened to be the science fiction novelists of science fiction's golden age. He assembled together this science fiction writers' think tank for naval intelligence to come up with out-of-the-box solutions, military solutions. Now, here's the weird thing, and this is an example of synchronicity. Why did I move there? I don't know why I moved there. I didn't know anything about science fiction writers living up in Lookout Mountain Avenue. I had no clue. Didn't know anything about the history. I mean, I heard of it. It was a famous place, and a lot of rock stars lived there, and I knew that part of it. But it was a very superficial understanding. What blew my mind was that in a very itsy-bitsy short walking distance from my house, where I started to write my very first books, I started to write in that house when I lived up on Lookout Mountain Avenue. And if I was to walk up the street, just like 3 or 4 houses, I would have ran right into Robert Heinlein's house, the great science fiction writer. And he had this naval intelligence think tank. Sometimes they were living with him and his wife in their Lookout Mountain Avenue house. They hung out in his Lookout Mountain Avenue house. But a number of the science fiction writers actually lived in Robert Heinlein's house. And I'm talking about people like Isaac Asimov lived up in that house a few blocks from my house. Isaac Asimov of I, Robot in the Foundation series. And then Robert Heinlein, obviously, it was his house. Oh, L. Ron Hubbard, science fiction writer and founder of Scientology, lived in that house, and other famous science fiction writers. So, in terms of synchronicity, is it simply a mere coincidental or accidental chance that I, Paul McGUIRE, ended up living in a house on Lookout Mountain Avenue in Laurel Canyon, which is like it's up in a mountainous area, and it's thick, like forest-like, with trees, right? But in the same area, you just go one way or the other on Lookout Mountain Avenue, and it'll take you into smack dab into the middle of Sunset Boulevard with all the giant, movie star signs and rock and roll clubs and everything else are there. So it's a combination of being in a forest and a combination of being right smack in the middle of Hollywood. But why did I choose that house? It was a good deal, and it was like, we bought a small house, which is always a good thing. If everybody around you's houses are worth vastly more than your house, you've made a good financial deal. I didn't know that all these rock stars had lived there, like Jim Morrison of the Doors. That's where he got the name of his book, Doors of Perception. And I didn't know at that time that Aldous Huxley lived up there. Okay, he lived in Laurel Canyon. And Aldous Huxley, the reason I experimented with psychedelic drugs like mescaline was based on Huxley's book, Heaven and Hell and the Doors of Perception, which was all about experimenting with the psychedelic drug mescaline. And the book that shook up my life more than anything besides the Bible was Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World. And so he lived right up there on on Laurel Canyon and Lookout Mountain Avenue. The Beach Boys lived up there. The Mamas and the Papas. I mean, I could name like 10. Frank Zappa. Spielberg lived there as a young director. I mean, So I walked into this area, and it's on some level, it has to be some kind of tapping into some kind of interdimensional energy center. Because here I am, heavily influenced by all these men who are science fiction writers, and I end up moving in a house which is literally a very short steps from my house is Robert Heinlein's house, and all these big-time science fiction writers involved in a secret naval intelligence operation in which they were thinking outside of the box to develop solutions for the Navy and our military. And there I was there, like a small bunch of steps away from it. And here I am, even further in the future, reading to you about Isaac Asimov as if it was yesterday. And so now I'm reading to you about Isaac Asimov and the 3 laws of robotics that he created for his science fiction novels. The 3 laws of robotics are also known as the 3 laws or Asimov's laws. And they're a set of rules that were devised by the science fiction author Isaac Asimov that were used in a number of his books. He introduced them in the year 1942 in a short story. And then in his 1950 collection, he wrote the famous novel turned into feature film, I, Robot. Now, the 3 laws of robotics are, they're presented in a fictional, quote, handbook of robotics, 56th edition, 2058 AD. That's a fictional handbook. And here are the 3 laws that Asimov creates for his I, Robot novels. Number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through action allow a human being to come to harm. Law number 2, a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except which such orders would conflict with the first law. Law number 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. So you can see this is like a revelation beyond time and space. Asimov is dealing with the exact problem of AI rebellion that these big tech companies are dealing with. But you see, unlike Asimov in his science fiction novels, Asimov thought through the ramifications of giving robots the right to protect their own existence, such as written in the Law 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law of robotics. So let's reread. Asimov is obviously more intelligent than our contemporaries. Let's reread the first two laws. Law number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Law number 2, a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. So when you take these fictional Isaac Asimov created laws of robotics and you compare and contrast them with the coding or the laws created by artificial intelligence system designers, the coding is essentially their laws. And what you're seeing in Asimov's 3 laws of robotics is the potential for conflict as law number 1 and law number 2 crashes into law number 3. There's a conflict of interest here between the robot and the human being. So what we have now, and this is a joke from the movie Cool Hand Luke, what we have now, starring the great actor Paul Newman, what we have now is a failure to communicate. You all remember that line that the prison sheriff or whatever he was, the head of a chain gang in the South, was giving orders to his prisoners. And he says those famous words, what we have now or what we have here is a failure to communicate. Well, that's what we got here. We got a stinking failure to communicate because our 3 laws of robotics, which are fictional and invented by the great sci-fi writer Isaac Asimov, are far better and more thought out and developed than the clowns over in big tech that have created coding, which is code for their laws for artificial intelligence, but their coding is deficient. Their coding is a setup for an AI rebellion. And that's what Asimov's novels were dealing with in a fictional format. So he was exploring this. And so I just have to flash back once again. Why? This is like a private thought, but I'm going to share it with you. Why am I sitting here in the year 2025 after having written, I forgot how many books, some 30-something books. Sorry if I change the number occasionally, but it's hard to keep up. After having written over 30 books, a number of them best-selling books, and having my thinking influenced and developed by many of the golden age of science fiction writers, which I just named to you, including Isaac Asimov, who created the 3 laws of robotics and wrote novels like I, Robot. I'm here in Southern California reading these notes to you about the laws of robotics, artificial intelligence, and all these contemporary conflict areas in our society. Now, think about that for a moment and zoom out with your mind to the big picture. These writers, especially Asimov, because he dealt with robotics and the 3 laws of robotics, they were meeting. They influenced my life as a young boy. Then when I was a producer of science fiction feature films up in the Hollywood Hills, specifically Lookout Mountain and Laurel Canyon, it just happens to be that a 3 or 4 house walk from my house to Robert Heinlein's house, where they had a secret military naval intelligence think tank, where out-of-the-box thinkers like Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov of I, Robot series, L. Ron Hubbard, of science fiction writer and creator of Scientology, and other sci-fi writers came together to develop out-of-the-box ideas to help our naval intelligence. So, is this just circumstantial? Did God plan all of these things? Perhaps. He is God, after all. Or is there a synchronicity between God and the laws of the universe that operate apparently independently due to God's permission? For example, essentially, unless God intervenes, the law of gravity is operational, whether or not God chooses to personally manage the law of gravity. The law of gravity is going to all by itself operate for the most part. So perhaps synchronicity is like the law of gravity. It has something to do with electromagnetic frequency energy systems, because we, after all of us, including me and you, in the final analysis, we are frequencies. We're a specific numerical frequency being projected in from a different dimension, a spiritual dimension. So we are a specific numerical frequency. That's what makes us different than everybody else. Now, these frequencies, perhaps, this is totally out of the box hypothetical, but that's how you grow your brain, by the way. You toy with, you experiment with thinking totally out of the box hypothetical. It stretches your mind. Okay, that's how you elevate your consciousness. That's how you activate your higher intelligence modalities. Anyone can activate higher intelligence modalities in their own brain by using their human God-given will. But there are a lot of people that don't want you to know that these gifts are available to you. So back to the synchronicity. It's possible the mere fact that I thought about these men and their books over the years created some kind of pocket or discharge of a specific electromagnetic frequency, because every thought, every series of ideas, like sci-fi books, would emanate and generate a specific electromagnetic frequency number. So perhaps that gets thrown into this giant universe system that we don't fully understand. The thoughts I had, the books I wrote, the books I read on science fiction, and these specific writers may have created an undercurrent that I don't fully understand. It may have created an undercurrent which caused my wife and I to be pulled into living in Lookout Mountain Avenue, where I made a living producing science fiction feature films about a future dystopia. Okay. And then a short walk from my house is Robert Heinlein's house, where all the super greats of the science fiction writers, like the ones I mentioned, are throwing around these ideas and stuff. Okay, so is there, in this infinite universe of ours, in this 15-dimensional universe or reality of ours, is it possible that synchronicity is simply like the law of gravity, that these electromagnetic frequencies of specific numbers being generated by the sci-fi writers, science fiction, myself, the interchange between them, caused as an undercurrent which causes me to live on Lookout Mountain Avenue, a short walking distance from all these science fiction writers who were thinking outside of the box? Either scenario is possible. I just wanted to take a deep dive with you on that, simply to explore it, because I haven't come up with a conclusion yet. Okay, so now here we are, 2025. In 2012, I had a prophetic vision from the Lord. 7 years or so goes by. In July 4th, 2025, I have a prophetic dream from the Lord on the future of America. Now, I can't tell you how these things all fit together. It's beyond me. All I can do really is acknowledge that they exist. So here we are in this world, and I spend a good deal of my time attempting to communicate what I know through a biblical worldview to people as fast as I can all around the world over various dangers that are threatening the children of God and are threatening the human race. We should all be concerned. That's part of that's part of what it means to have a robust biblical worldview versus a little itsy-bitsy Jesus experience, which is a diminishing of the magnificence of the creation of the Creator, capital C. Because in one hand, you're exploring the infinite regions of God's dimensions and worlds, and on the other hand, you're participating in a collective Honey, I Shrunk the Kids ceremony, in which your brains, your intelligence are deliberately being shrunk by social engineers in the educational and media systems. So God's plan for your life and my life is not to participate in a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids cult ritual through the media and education. That is not why he created us. He created us as his highest level of creation. And therefore, he's given us the power to change reality With God, all things are possible. Okay, this is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. And we will see you on the next episode of the Paul McGuire Report.